Were you destined to be a lawyer because of your mom and dad? Was that meant to be?
I think so. I went to college, and I think I had applied at, I don't know, 4 or 5 colleges, and I think I had put down arts, either pre-med or pre-law. And then basically when I went to college at Duquesne, I studied, arts, which was crap, nothing there. But then as I got older, ready to get finished with school, then I even was considering ROTC advanced, and I didn't really decide that was a good move. So I applied to law school at Duquesne and St. John's and Buffalo. And the first time I had ever been declined was in Buffalo. And I wasn't totally declined. I was put on their waiting list. Yeah. And I was really, I wasn't a very good student, and until I got to law school. But then it was fine. And so I guess, then everybody said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go back to Jamestown and practice with my dad.
Yeah. Duquesne, was that the Willie Somerset era?
That was the era. Good friend of mine, Willie Somerset. Yeah. Great basketball then.
Who were some of the other players during that time period?
Well, obviously before Willie, our stars were Cy Green and those people in '56. After Willie, we had a nice team. I had graduated, but a nice team with the Nelson twins.
Oh yeah.
And Jarrett Durham, and we played Bonaventure that year. I went up to watch them play. Got destroyed because that was Bob Lanier's senior year.
Yeah.
But they were a nice team. They went to the NIT and did pretty well. But while I was there, we went to the NIT, I think 2 years, and it was exciting. I mean, the NIT back in those days was a pretty good tournament. But I loved, I was the Duquesne Duke.
No kidding. How did that happen?
Believe it or not, our fraternity did the Duke. We had the tuxedo and the whole bit, and the senior that had done it before was graduating, and I just said, let me have the outfit. So I took it and basically just showed up at the game with the tuxedo on, and basically was the Duke that particular season.
So what was your role there?
Nothing. I just went out with the cheerleaders and cheered and pranced around and basically had a good time.
That's fantastic.
Got pretty drunk before I went out there though. It was a good time.
So this was during college, right?
Yep.
That's fantastic.
Yep.
Your name on a plaque down there?
No. Like I said, this was pretty informal, and the university didn't sanction it. It was just something that my fraternity had done, and I just took the outfit, and I don't think I passed it on. I think I still had the hat somewhere, and I may have given the tuxedo away, but I think I kept the hat.
Oh, so that's it. So the last person, when they write the story, might be Douglas Spoto.
Well, and the thing is, the first game, I'm going to do this, and I'm at the outside the door where the team's going to run out onto the floor.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to, at least run out with them. And the captain of the team, his name was Denny Cuff. He was a nice kid. He was a pharmacy student, and he was from Pittsburgh, and he threw me the ball. Like, lead us on. Here I am trying to dribble across the floor at the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh, the Igloo, with my cane, my hat, and trying to dribble a ball. I don't know if I made the layup. I don't think I did. And I said after that, I'm not doing this. But don't do this to me, Denny.
So that was a one-shot deal.
That's correct.
Oh my goodness.
But it was fun.
Oh, that's great. Well, Richard was saying, extolling your virtues in law school, like you were the #1 student at Duquesne. Is that right?
Yeah,
Don't need to be humble.
it ended up that way.
Yeah.
The very last semester.
Did you feel some competition? Did you know kind of where you were as far as just saying, I want
Well,
to be number one?
I knew after my freshman year, I was fourth in my class, which was a huge surprise.
Yeah.
And then my second, junior year, I was pretty much there, fourth in my class. You know, I took it serious. I mean, I took it serious not because of any class ratings, but I was, you know, I had still never convinced myself that I could do this. And I also needed to really concentrate on studies because of the New York bar exam, which everybody told me, you're not passing. Because back in those days, out-of-state students were like, forget it.
Right.
So I studied and studied and studied, and basically my senior year, I was really concentrating on getting prepped up for the bar. The New York, I had a couple of New York books. I think I had that book, Williston, no, not Williston, it was the procedure book that everybody had. And then I had a substantive law book on New York law, which I went through 3-4 times. And then, you know, naturally, since I was studying so much, you know, and I was married and everybody else was out working or whatever, you know, I stayed at the library and did my daily stuff for my senior year, which most people didn't concentrate much in senior courses. Well, I did. And I pretty much aced most of them and ended up first. And it was a big surprise to the faculty. They had no idea. None. Because I was not I wasn't very involved with courses. I mean, I didn't get up there and, you know, argue with the professors. I just kind of hated to just even talk.
Right.
So I ended up first, but, you know, whatever.
So when you graduated, what year did you graduate?
68.
68. So you would have just missed the composite we have right outside there, which was a 67.
Oh, really?
JBA composite.
Yeah.
I'll bring that in. So when that happened, you passed the bar exam, and then you just kind of come right back home?
Yep. Took my wife and we came home.
What was your dad's expectations of you?
Well, I think he expected me to, you know, work hard. That was one thing, and he was patient. You know, he tried to, you know, give me some help, and he didn't push me to, you know, do anything that I really didn't feel comfortable doing. But we worked okay together.
Talk about your dad.
My dad was a wonderful fellow. I mean, he was very religious, very compassionate, and he tried to do his best for all of his clients. He was very reasonable on his fees, and he worked hard. And his practice was not that big, to be honest. Everybody thought we were like millionaires. Well, my dad was, you know, not making a lot of money. In fact, he did a lot of work on collections. He represented the credit bureau. It wasn't the credit bureau. It was another. I forget what it was called. And he'd spend hours and hours on these collections, you know, calling people. And I said, Dad, I don't want to do that. You know, and suing people, you know, for, you know, small amounts of money. In fact, that's what I did before I became a lawyer. During the summers, I would serve process for them. And I said, Dad, I don't want to do this. I mean, and then at the end of the month, we would have to account to this client, and, you know, we'd get like 30% of what we collected, and we did that. I did that for a few years, and I said, Dad, now this is one client I don't want to keep.
Right.
So I started doing, you know, bankruptcies and, you know, a little bit of real estate, and I'd go to city court a lot, things like that, and, you know, it grew from there, really.
Was your dad a first generation Italian? I mean, did he come over?
No, he was born here.
Born here?
Yeah.
Were there many Italian lawyers at the time your dad practiced?
I was thinking about that. I can tell you who they were. It was my father. There was Mike Lombardo, Sam Conti, the Alessis, Sam Sr., and then the two boys. Tubi Scarpino. I think that was it in Jamestown.
Was there a Brunacini?
Yeah, but I didn't know him. He must have been before my time.
Okay.
Well, I mean, there was Lucian, but I don't consider Lucian to be an old Italian at the time.
Right.
I don't remember any others, though. There may have been, but I don't remember them, and I don't think I ever had anything with them. But
Did you guys ever talk about, was there, because there was only a few of them, was there any sort of distinguishing factor that there's the Italians
versus the Swedes?
or something like that? I mean, is there anything like that? Did you ever?
You know, I thought about that, but not really.
Yeah.
Not really. You know, they all gave him respect. I mean, you know, they liked my father. I mean, he was he wasn't anybody that made waves.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, he did his work and he was respectful.
Yeah.
And most of them were, if there was bigotry, we didn't see it in the law practice, to be honest with you.
I've never heard it, but it's always a curiosity.
No, I didn't see it. I mean, they always were nice to me.
Yeah. So, and talk about your mom. My gosh, I had a chance to interview her, and that was the most delightful
I've
thing.
seen her interview with you several times, and that was amazing. My mother, see, I didn't even realize that she had practiced. I mean, I knew she went to law school. My mother, when she was the only one in her family that went to college, she went to University of Buffalo, and initially she was in pre-med, and they kind of like threw her out. They didn't, they figured that, we don't want any women in pre-med, so they ended up letting her go to law school, and that, and she got through there with no problem, and she came back to Jamestown with my dad, and she took the bar and passed it, obviously, and then she did work 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
With, I think it was with my dad, and my dad started out with a fellow by the name of Joseph Rice. You probably will see him in some of the old ones. And she worked for a year, and then they had a family,
Mm-hmm.
and that was it.
Did you get involved in insurance too?
Yes, yeah, well, yeah, my mother had an insurance company in her name. And my dad and Rosemary, my wonderful secretary, ran the insurance company.
Okay.
And obviously that was one of my dad would do real estate, and he'd say, "You need insurance?" And they'd say, and he'd ask him, "Do you have an insurance agent?" And he goes, "No." And then he'd say, "Well, we have a little insurance here." So I said, "Dad, I don't know if that's right." He says, "That's not wrong."
Yeah.
I said, and then Rosemary would have to do all that work.
Yeah.
And, we laugh a lot, Rosemary and I, because we still are very close.
That's great. So as you're, joining the firm, you're the young guy in the Bar Association, was there areas which you thought you would like to at least get into? Public defenders, perhaps? Some of those areas just to get some courtroom experience? Was that of interest?
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really. I mean, I really didn't like court, trial work. I did some, but it just wasn't interesting to me. I was just too nervous. I just didn't feel comfortable.
Well, Richard was...
Richard was the opposite.
Yeah, and he was saying there was an event, there was a case where it was Slater and Spoto in court, one place, one time. He says, "I'll leave it to Doug to tell the story."
Right. There was an arson case, and it involved the bar up the street here. What was the name of the bar? Anyway, the owner of the bar apparently had recruited two bums, criminals, to burn down the bar.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently they were recruited right down here in the donut shop that was on the corner here, right where you are.
Yeah.
Okay. And he sent a woman, probably his associate or girlfriend, to recruit these guys to burn down, was it the Victory? I'm not sure. I forget what
That was one of them, yeah.
it may have been the Victory. I don't remember the name. Anyway, so these two fellas were hired to burn the place. Well, they went in, and they set up all these little candles and, you know, stuff to light the place up on fire. So they lit all these things and then went back to the donut shop and wait for the sirens. Well, never happened. The sirens never came. And all of a sudden, the older of the two gentlemen said, we got to go back there and make sure we get this thing lit. Well, my client, as it ended up, said, no, I'm not going back. I'm done. So the other guy went back, and sure enough, the candles and everything didn't work. So he just lit a fire, and it burned up the place pretty good. Didn't take long. Both of these fellas were arrested, and Lee Town appointed myself to represent the younger of the two, and Howard Crosley to represent the other one. And Richard was the attorney, or was the assistant DA.
Yeah, okay.
I had never had a felony case in my life. And I did not take it too serious. Because I said to Lee Adams, I said, Judge, I said, I'm not capable, I'm not prepared, I am not ready for doing this. And he said, don't worry, we'll take care of it, Doug. You just show up. Oh, all right. Because, you know, then I'd get served with these papers to do this and that. I go, what the hell is this? So I went through the motions with him, and we finally had our pre-trial, and at this point, Richard's going to offer us, you know, our deal. So he offered attempted arson in the 4th degree or something to both guys, which, you know, I mean, they were guilty. I mean, the guy wasn't about to, you know, get away. I mean, he hadn't gone back, but, you know, he didn't stop it, so he was definitely going to get found guilty. They confessed, as a, you know, anyway. So, I mean, what kind of a defense could I put up? So they offered that attempted arson, and 6 months. And I objected. I said, I'm not going to take that deal. I said, my guy backed out. He didn't do it. I said, you know, he could have, I mean, I know he could have stopped it, but this other guy did the deal. I said, I'm not taking 6 months. You know, I want my guy out now, because they had been in jail for 3 months, and the other guy should stay longer. Well, they took that deal. So that was the arrangement. Okay, so we had to go back to court to do the deal. So we're in court, ready to make the deal, you know, plead the guilty and the whole bit. So I'm sitting in the table at the defense, you know, table in the Lee's courtroom, and Richard was on the other side. And Lee is obviously doing his usual song and dance with all the different cases, and all of a sudden Lee, you know, goes. Everybody thought he was just doing his typical taking a little nap. And I looked at him and I said, he's not taking any nap. So I ran up, and sure enough, he was out. He had a heart attack.
Oh my God.
And I was, you know, and I'm like, hey, you know, get up here. This is not an act. So they ran up, and the sheriffs came and the whole bit, and they got him revived a little bit, and they came with the stretcher, and they were taking him out. and Lee finally had, you know, woke up again, and he looks at me, he goes, Douglas, don't worry, I'll take care of you next time you come back in. And I said, God, I gotta come back again for this stupid case.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable. I never heard that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Leah, you know, I'll be honest. I mean, I was the only one. I was like, kept looking. I guess this guy's not taking a little nap.
Yeah.
He was out.
A memory, a vignette, maybe a story, or anything like Howard Crosley. Howard Crosley was theatric, to say the least.
Correct.
And did you have much interactions with him?
Yeah, I had a lot of cases with Howard. Howard the Howard was the lawyer that you wanted to work with in the morning. Once he came back from lunch, he was not a good lawyer to deal with, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Him and Al Ford spent their lunch hours at
So Tommy's?
Tommy's, yeah. And that was a bad scene,
Yeah.
usually. But Howard and I had several good-sized cases, corporate cases, and we worked them all out.
We talked about Judge Adams, great story. Al McKee, was he part of your world?
Nah, Al was not really. I mean, I had matters with him, but he wasn't one of he wasn't that involved with us. But he was a defense attorney, civil defense, okay? And he was with Bill Blood,
Yeah.
who was an excellent lawyer, excellent man, nice fella. So I mean, I had several, I had deals with him all the time, but they were nice fellas to deal with.
Let me put this in front of you and see if as your eyes glancing at a few of those folks, whether a vignette may jump out or a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you the names of the lawyers that I started with.
Sure.
I thought about that. Dalton, who was a year or two older than me. Lynn Hartley. Jeff Weezy. Dalton Burgett. John Plum came like a year later than me or 2 years later than me. But those were the lawyers that were really my age and, starting around when I did. A couple before me and a couple afterwards. I mean, there were a number of lawyers that came shortly after we did, maybe 2-3 years, that that we're obviously, we're worked with, that we got along with. But there was one lawyer that I was friends with that I enjoyed working with that was like a year or two older than me, your ex-partner, Bob. Yeah, Bob. I went to a bar association summer stag, I think my junior year of law school, and I met Lynn and Bob and Dalton and Jeffrey. Not John. John came in a few years later. John was in the Army. He was in the JAG Corps, and he started working with Terry Duro.
Oh,
You remember Terry Duro?
I do, yeah.
And that's where I met John. Yeah. And, I knew, right off, nice fella, and we got along fine. But I did not have a lot of matters with him over the years.
Well, talk about Bob Sharp. Frankly, I haven't had anybody talk about Bob.
Bob, good fella, and nice fella. I mean, he had a bad wife, but not a nice person. But Bob and I, we did a lot of things together. We went on a lot of fishing trips.
Yeah.
We bought a boat. All of us bought a boat. We went and bought this boat out somewhere near Salamanca. An old Lyman. We used to love Lyman boats. So Bob and I and Walt and I'm not sure who else went. Well, there was others in the group, but we went out and bought the boat. And it was a little, our little boat club.
Yeah.
We kept the boat at Bob's cottage, and we did a lot together. We socialized a lot, did a lot of Monday night football, and I had, a lot of deals with Bob, and he was fine to work with, Anybody that worked with Sherry, was fine.
Yeah.
He was the best.
Yeah. Well, what is your impression of Sherry?
Loved him. I mean, he was a good guy.
Yeah.
Why not? Any kind of a deal. If you weren't doing it the right way, he didn't scream and yell at you. He just would maybe give you a little hint. But most of the time, him and I had no problems. And he did his work, I did my work, and we made our peace. you know.
Was there a mentor for you, other than your dad? Was there somebody you kind of went to when you had a question, something that you just was concerned about, or kind of a go-to guy, whether it was in the bankruptcy world, which you did some, and real estate?
Well, probably not in the beginning. I pretty much relied on my father, the first few years, and whatever he could give me, he gave me, and a lot of times I just had to take my lumps and learn from the best. And after we had practiced, I think, together for 7 years, then I wanted to enlarge and get some help, so we brought in Richard and Walt.
Mm-hmm.
And they pretty much, we all meshed our whatever talents we had, and worked out fine. But before that, probably, I think probably I spent time talking with Lynn and Bill Cass. They were right down the hall from me, and we would talk together, and maybe I would get some tips from them or some lumps.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot, doing that. But because my dad, would he wanted me to get into divorces and you name it, everything that he didn't do. So I did. Did it for a while, and then finally gave it up when I got the other guys in.
I have a story about your dad. Just starting off, and I was doing probably my first or second real estate deal ever, and your dad was on the other side. And he called me, and he goes, Greg, I'd love to meet you. I certainly look forward to meeting with you. He goes, you're off on the wrong track on this real estate, but I'll help you. Come on over. Bring the title search. I'll sit you down. I'll walk you through it. Because I was just I was flailing. And he was so good, so gracious, and very senior at the moment, kind of walking me through all that. But I'll never forget, your dad kind of set me wonderfully straight. I mean, there are others we've all gone through who would set you straight in a different tone. But that's a very, very fond memory of your dad.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said. He was a gentleman, and obviously, if there was something going on that was not correct, he would, rather than write you a stinging letter, he would call you and try to clue you in on what you needed.
Exactly.
I did that. I never really jumped on anybody. The only person I did, I was thinking about this the other day too, was Ned Barone.
Mm-hmm.
Ned was a terrible civil lawyer. Mm-hmm. Terrible. And I had a real estate matter with him, and he had no clue. Mm-hmm. And I'd call him and say, Ned, you need this, you need that, Ned, get this. And I mean, this thing dragged, and I finally ended up doing most of the things that he needed to do. And we finally closed it, or I did. And I said, Ned, I'm never going to have another real estate deal with you again. I said, I won't do it. And he said, Doug, don't worry about it. You won't have to worry because I'm never going to do another one. But I'll be honest, most of the older lawyers, they were not, they were pretty easy to deal with. And they they knew what they needed. And they, if it was either in a nice letter or a phone call saying, this deed description needs to be changed, or this needs to be done, or whatever. And it was that way. I mean, practicing law back in those days was a pleasure.
Yeah.
A pleasure.
You did probably more real estate than anybody, but another one who did a lot of real estate was Charlie Phillips.
He was technically my mentor, to be honest with you. Charlie and I were very close. I loved the man. I used to have lunch with him a lot of days in Lashandro's, and I'll be honest, Joe Pita, as the firm was called, mm-hmm. There wasn't a lot of guys at Joe Pita that I really cared for. Mm-hmm. I dealt with them, but I didn't care for him, except Charlie Phillips. Mm-hmm. He was the best. Him and I think Al Teener, no, and Mr. Johnson, no. Anderson, he was a good fellow.
Yeah.
But
You probably never dealt with Ron, did you, Ron, much, Ron Mellon?
not really. I don't think, I think Ron was into, what was he into? Some kind, was he more into civil litigation?
Oh,
he was in transportation. He was like Teener's assistant, right?
Exactly, they had a niche under themselves.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Charlie, get the bits and pieces together.
Charlie was the best.
Yeah.
I mean, I really loved Charlie, and he, I learned a lot and did a lot of deals with him, and basically from there did a lot more.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed searching. I did. And I'll be honest with you, I learned a lot of items that were not locally because of the bankruptcy field.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically taught the abstract company certain things that the bankruptcy allowed and what was needed, and they really took that to heart. They said that was great, and it was something I thought I felt good about it.
Well, that was another niche. Was that something, had your dad done bankruptcy?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he did bankruptcies for a long time. Back in those days, it was not a judge, it was a referee, and his name was Pelletier, and he would appoint trustees. A case would come up, and he'd go, "Mr. Spoto, you be the trustee," or such and such, and he'd appoint the trustees at the court. And my dad would get most of them because he enjoyed doing that, and a couple of other lawyers that did a lot of bankruptcy work. So that's, so when I started doing them, then actually he was giving me the trustee cases. And we did that until they changed the federal law and did away with the referee, and actually had a bankruptcy judge who was a fellow by the name of Burl McGuire.
Burl McGuire, yeah.
And he was a fantastic judge. He was brilliant, and he made life easy. I mean, he would tell you what to do, or what the case, what the decision was, or what to argue, and and he just made it easy because and if you paid attention to the guy, then the next time it was there. And as it turned out, they did away with appointing trustees. They had standing trustees. So myself and Bill Foley were the first two trustees. And we did that for, 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
And so as a result, I got to, obviously became good friends with Judge McGuire. Judge McGuire was, believe it or not, Art Bailey's roommate in law school.
No kidding.
What a combination.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Did some of that occur over at the post office? Was the third floor?
Yeah.
That was the federal court room?
Yep.
Is that where you were for bankruptcies?
Yeah, I think most of the time. I'm trying to think where all the various, there used to be some, I think we had a few years we did them in the hotel where the surrogate office was. But when they built that new post office, that courtroom was pretty much where we did all the bankruptcy work. But I think there were other places we did it, but I can't remember, to be honest with you. I never thought about that. We had to do it in Mayville for a while.
Wow.
That was a pain, having to drive up to Mayville for those, but yeah, it was okay. We did those cases in the legislative chambers.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was a nice place. That was good for that kind of court. Yeah.
Did you get involved at all as in the public defender's office or the assistant? Were you part of that world where a lot of young lawyers ended up?
Not really. I mean, I was blessed with my father. I basically went in working with him, and he basically, gave me a salary, which I did not earn. for the first year or two. And it was enough to get by.
Right.
So I never really had to do the assistant DA or assistant public defender case, but I did work town courts or town attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
I was a town attorney in the beginning with North Harmony. Billy Green was the supervisor back then, and he was right down the hall from us in the Wellman building. He did insurance and financial things, and I got to be friends with him, and he said, come up and be my attorney. So for $500, I was the town attorney for North Harmony.
Your original offices were where?
In the Wellman building,
Wellman
fifth
building?
floor.
Fifth floor? Who else was in the Wellman building?
On our floor was Phil Erickson. And then obviously he brought in Paul Webb and another lawyer that I don't know if he's in this, who left town. I forget. I'm trying to remember his name. I used to hang around with him a lot. He got divorced. What's his name? I can't remember. Anyway, they were on the fifth floor and us. Next floor down, Mike Lombardo was there with, I think he was, who was he with?
Pickard wasn't around then, was he?
No,
No, he was
Al Pickard wasn't around. Leet was around for a year or two after. Well, he was around for a while.
Yeah.
Pearlie's were in that building. Who else? Trying to look at some pictures. I mean, obviously Bill Cass and Lynn Hartley were there.
Was Sam Conti there?
Sam Conti was in that building. Yeah.
Marcus Conley?
Marcus was with Conti, I think.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, Mark Conley. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot Mark. Yeah, he was a good guy. They were all good guys. I mean, I never had a problem. Any of the older guys were easier to work with than the younger guys. Most of those names you brought up were in my building. Like I'm looking, Lyle was in my building. Dan Isaacson was in my building. I think Wayne Herrick was in my building, and Wayne was my boss at the welfare department. Lynn, obviously. Ernie Leet, Lombardo, Mike Lombardo. John Selstrom was with Mike Lombardo. Stan Weeks, he was in the hotel. Jeffrey, he was in there, our building for a while. Dalton was there. He was with Mike. Obviously, Phil Erickson, Al Ford was in my building.
Was Stan practicing then?
Stan
Lundeen?
Yeah.
He was Al? He was with Al, right?
Yeah. Bill Cass. Willard had left the Jamestown. He was working out of Frewsburg,
Yeah.
his senior. Joe Gerasi was with Lucian down in Falconer. Ernie Lee, what a treat.
Right. I have my own impressions of Ernie because it seemed like any deal you did with him would turn into a constitutional law issue.
He was a treat. He was a brilliant fellow. He did he did the sewers.
Yeah.
Big job, nice job. Ernie lived on Houston, West Ellicott, just down the street from me. So we would go fishing, muskie fishing.
Oh, really?
He'd bring a thing of martinis, that big, and I'd row, and he'd drink. He had a sauna in his garage. He was a good fellow, nice man, nice fellow. As we grew older, I guess it was just so much easier to be lawyers and be respectful and have a good life, Yeah. Miss it. But it got to the point when I was ready to retire, it just got just too difficult. Too many things they wanted. Too much. You know, the banks were difficult. The courts were difficult. Too much bureaucracy. It was just got to the point it was just not fun anymore. It was a real difficult time.
Well, Doug, I'd be totally remiss if I didn't say that the greatest fun I've had, and it was pure theater, was to do the daily ritual of going to Lysandro's and with other attorneys, because that's where, frankly, a lot of people, I knew, if you needed to get something done, they wouldn't call back. Inevitably, you'd buttonhole them there.
Right.
And the deals were done there. But you and your good buddy Lucian holding court there at Lysandro's, and inevitably having some conversation which would elevate in tone to the point you were arguing over whether it was an easement or right of way, whatever it happened to be, but you let your best Italian theatrics, both of you, and it was just theater. It was pure theater. We knew you loved each other, but it was just one wonderful entertainment. So, you guys are great. And I remember, of course, both of you got honored at the Jackson Center. We did a Chautauqua Abstract Company thing. And
you did that? Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
Did I ever? I know you probably want to wind this down.
No, I'm fine. I got all the time in the world.
Did I ever tell you about the comedy time I had with Judge Phillips?
No.
It was funny. Judge Phillips obviously was the surrogate, and occasionally he would have to fill in for family court. And I'm trying to remember the judge back then. He's not in this picture though. It's amazing.
O'Connor?
No, he's not. He's not on here, and he should have. He would have been here when I started, unless he's here. No, because Len was family court in this picture. Anyway.
Hollenbeck.
Huh?
Hollenbeck?
Yes.
Family court.
He's not in here.
Yeah.
Judge Hollenbeck. So anyway, Judge Phillips was subbing for Hollenbeck, and the court in Jamestown at that time was up in the post office, that real formal court. Mm-hmm. Well, to make a long story short, I was doing paternity cases at the time for the welfare department. So I had a case. The woman was a dwarf. A dwarf. She was this big. Mm. The father was a big black guy. He was about that big. Yeah. 5 kids. No problem. I mean, they were not in any controversy. We just had to, go in and make sure they admitted it so the kids were at least legitimatized. So we went in to the court. Here's this 6'8" big black guy next to me, and then me, and the dwarf. And McKinley Phillips was on the bench. Mr. Spoto, nice to see you. And you're such and such? Yes, sir, I am. Mr. Spoto, is your client here? Yes, she is, sir. Where is she? I said, right there. He couldn't see her. He was up on the bench. They had the railing. Yeah. She was below the railing. He couldn't see her. And he finally looked over like this. And he finally could see her, and you never saw a judge get so embarrassed. It was hilarious.
Oh my God. Well, I can see what happened, my God.
He couldn't see her.
Yeah.
But he was a good fella too. He was, of course, surrogate work, they were all good judges. I mean, they're not going to, give you a lot of heat. It was a good court. Yeah. You made money and you did your work.
Were there other kind of crazy incidents you might say that you were at bankruptcy court, or whether it's domestic relations, or because sometimes divorce matters can get fairly heated, where you'd say, Greg, you're not going to believe this story?
Well, the divorces, back in those days, the biggest part of the divorce was making your motion before, Bill Cass or whoever was the acting Supreme Court judge at the time, for counsel fees and temporary support. Well, most of the time, I had a man and Dalton had a woman, and we'd go in there and, same stick and the same result. My guy was, ordered to pay $500 to Dalton and give $50 a week to his client, who may have been the biggest bitch in the world and prompted the whole thing. On the other foot, I'd go in, and Jeffrey would be the other attorney, and I would come away with most of what Dalton got, but not as much. Not as much. I mean, I never got Dalton's stuff, but that became what Jeffrey called tree stand justice. And that's how we carried it out for years. Tree stand justice. It was hilarious, but it just was not fun.
Yeah.
Because whenever I had another matter with Dalton, I'd have to tell my client, I says, we're going to get our ass kicked. I said, because I know the situation, so be prepared.
Yeah.
So it went. A little more even keel with Jeffrey, because, we weren't, Bill Cass's, favorites.
Yeah.
But Bill he had his favorites.
Yeah.
Even though I hunted and fished with him, not in court.
Yeah. Interesting. Did you ever get, it's like, sometimes you were, whether it was doing welfare stuff or no, but with Wayne Herrick, we had a client that was actually adverse to you in the sense of they got emotional and they kind of
oh yeah,
sought you out.
Back in those days, with social service law, if a recipient, as I called them, didn't accept what the agency did for them or didn't do for them, they had a right to ask for what we called a fair hearing. Mm-hmm. Okay? The fair hearing, there was a judge or whatever, a referee type of person that was hired by the state to come down to conduct the fair hearing. I was obviously the attorney for the social service, and the fair hearing was usually held, I think, probably over in the city hall. And I was in this. I had a bunch of fair hearings and we'd bring in the caseworker, and obviously the welfare recipient would be on the other side, and the hearings were most of them waste of time because they didn't do what they were supposed to do, and the biggest thing was they didn't ask for it.
Yeah.
They didn't. If they would have followed the rules and just come in timely, they would have got something, and instead of, it was a procedural thing most of the time, and they lost. Well, this one particular case, it involved a black girl, and she came in with her helper, who was a leaper. Okay, her name was Fennell Leaper, mm-hmm. And she was hell on wheels. And so we got into it, and I think it just involved getting a crib for the pregnant girl. And again, I just basically asked the girl. I said, "Well, did you come in at such and such time to request a crib?" "No." I said, "Well, that's why you didn't get a crib." Well, this Fennell Leaper went ballistic because the hearing officer was going to, uphold the condition that she got no crib. She went wild. She started yelling, screaming, jumping on the table, cursing. The hearing officer ran out of the room and left me there to try to defend the everything that was on the table, all the machines. Well, this Fennell Leaper went ballistic. And the fellow that was worked with me at welfare was a fellow named John O'Brien. I don't know if you ever knew. John was a wonderful. He was a supervisor. He was a drunk, but he was a great fella, and he came in to try to help me ward off Fidel Leaper. And we were, like I said, we were in City Hall. I mean, we weren't far from the police station. And I kept, where the hell are the cops? Finally, they showed up, and Fidel just shut her mouth and walked out. But it was funny.
Oh my gosh.
When that hearing officer ran out of the room, I said, "Hey, I'm supposed to run out, not you." Yeah, those were good days.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's an experience.
Yeah, but this one really, a lot of names, a lot of faces there, a lot of people that I enjoyed with. I mean, I even got to be good friends with K.T. Johnson, believe it or not. Tough guy to deal with, tough guy to be friends with.
Yeah.
You know, I think he had a little bit of a problem with Italians, but as he got old, he was on the zoning board of appeals for Ellicott, and that's the work I did with Ellicott. And he and I would meet for coffee and talk and the whole bit, and we got to be good friends.
Okay.
You know, it's amazing how over the years, a lot of the fellas that you really never thought you could, you know, be friends with or socialize with or, you know, enjoy their company turned out to be, you know, there, really. You know, John Selstrom, I never did a lot with John Selstrom. I see him today, he's like, you know, we had like lost brothers.
Yeah.
You know, you walk into a restaurant, you know, sit down, talk, buy a drink together, unbelievable. Like I said, age mellows you, Greg.